My guest, good friend of mine, one of my best friends, one of my better friends, is David Cruz. And I'm happy to have you on. Thanks for agreeing to do this with me. You were really reluctant to.
I was.
You was very reluctant.
I was. But I'm happy I did it.
I'm happy you did it too.
Yeah.
I think that with the purpose of my show, yes, it's I mentioned it's catered to business people, entrepreneurs, business owners, small business owners. But at the end of the day, somebody has a story, and why not share it? And so that's why I call it your platform. So today, I'm looking forward to it. I came up with some questions I'm going to ask you. Talk a little bit about your journey. We'll take it from there, bro. So we'll have a candid conversation. That sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, cool. One of the things, Dave, I think I admire most about you, and this is real. You're a wealth of fucking knowledge. You know a lot of stuff. I think specifically in history. Am I right about that? You know a lot about history.
I think more than the common person.
Yeah.
I don't consider myself an expert, but I think more than the average man.
More than that. There's always something that you share with me from a historic standpoint, and it's always new. It's never something that I've heard from you before. And if it is, it's something that I heard from like 8 years ago. And over the 8 years, you drop a nugget of history on me.
So not a lot of repeated facts.
Not a lot of repeated facts.
Right.
But that's one. I think it's great to have that kind of knowledge. I don't want to say it's a passion of yours. I don't think it's a passion of yours, but I think you appreciate history.
Yeah.
And again, from my observation, first, and I think I probably know the answer of this. What historical? I guess when you look back in history, what's the most historical event or era that fascinates you the most?
I don't think I could pick just one.
Why is that?
I would think probably everything post 1700s. I like American history a lot. So it'd be 1700s to now. I love how this country was formed specifically because it's so unique compared to other countries across the world. Where before the U.S. was formed, it was, a lot of monarchies, a lot of kings. And this country was the first one that was, at least the idea was, a country that was governed by the people that lived in it, where everybody had equal rights. And I think one thing that's very unique about the way this country was founded was when the founding fathers had this concept that we had these inalienable rights that were given to us by our creator, not by the dictatorship, the kingdom, what it is. And that's very important because any rights that is given to you by the government can be taken from you by the government. But they made sure to put in our founding documents that it was given to us by our creator, by God. And that was never thought of before. So I really love American history for that concept and what came from that. Obviously an ugly history, but I think in many ways a necessary one. But I would think if I had to pick an era, it's 1700s to now.
What specifically from the 1700s? Is there anything that you in your readings and in your education that you came across that sticks out specifically from the 1700s?
Nothing specifically. I mean, I've read a lot about the Revolutionary War, Mexican-American War, the Civil War, a lot about the World Wars. World War I gets overshadowed by World War II, but World War I was very tragic. A lot of people, millions of people died of that war as well. We have it's a really interesting history. Just us specifically, how we're formed, the uniqueness of it, the 50 states who are like 50 different little countries, but DC being the capital, DC being its own sovereign little city, not part of any state. And that's just the U.S. I mean, you go to Europe's history before the U.S. was founded. I mean, there's stuff like from Africa and from Asia that I'm not really familiar with at all.
Yeah.
I'll get there eventually. And being, half Peruvian myself, I like a lot about the Incan history.
Yeah.
And then you go up to Central America with the Mayans.
What about the Roman Empire? I think we talked about it a few months back where there was this trend where wives would ask husbands how often you think about the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
And I had brought that up to you. I said, Claire asked me about it, and I'm like, never. And then I had asked you about it. You're like, yo, I probably think about it a couple times a week.
Yeah.
What about that when you think about history? It's not American history, but it's history.
That was funny. My cousin had randomly asked me that with a group of other female cousins of mine. And I thought about it and I said, probably about 3 times a week, 2-3 times a week.
2 or 3 times.
And then she also texted my brother, and my brother said, at least once a day.
Wow.
And they all started laughing. And they told me about the trend that was going on of people asking men how often you think about the Roman Empire and why that is. Mm-hmm. Some of it was the glorification of it from movies, like the movie The Gladiator, like 300, which was more the Greek civilization, but the same concept with the gladiators and all that. But for me, you see a lot of similarities between the Roman Empire and the United States today. And right now, some would say the fall of the United States, just like the fall of the Roman Empire. And you see a lot of things that are going on now that you could equate to a lot of the stuff that happened towards the end of the Roman Empire and the fall of it. They were expanding a lot throughout the world, biting off more than they could chew. Meanwhile, there were a lot of problems at home that they were ignoring, a lot of corruption in the Senate, in the government, invasion by the barbarians outside of it, So that's why I think about it pretty often. On top of the movies too, I like The Gladiator and all that. Of course.
Obviously, I think we're both pretty. I think politically speaking, they'll call it religious, right? We both have a faith. We both follow the same God. I would say. I'm not afraid to say that.
Yeah.
From a historic standpoint, are there any things that you think? Again, I use the Bible because Bible probably goes back BC, right? It goes back forever. And for me, when I think about history that influenced me, it's biblical.
Yeah.
I go back to that. But outside of that, my question to you would be: is there anything that, from a historic standpoint, that you, I won't say influenced you, but to this day, you're like, man, like this is. I always look back to this part of history and I remember like, man, I'm in a better place. And is there anything that influence you or guide your decision making based off of anything historically or no?
No, I wouldn't say anything specifically guides me or influences me. I just go back to what I originally said about the uniqueness of how this country was formed, and a reminder that there's a reason why everybody wants to come to this country. Mm-hmm. We were fortunate to be born here. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't understand how it's like living elsewhere,
right,
and not having the privilege and rights that we have. Right. We take it for granted. We're from here. The people who are fortunate enough to have traveled elsewhere, they have a different perspective of it, but it's really just that. I mean, we have these rights that are guaranteed to us. The Constitution is not something to keep the people in line. It's to keep the government in line.
Right.
And to remind them, we have these rights. They can't be taken away.
Right.
You have to, it's not about us asking you to prove to us why we need these rights.
Right.
It's up to you, the government, to tell us why we don't need them, right, why you're taking it away from us. And that's something that a lot of countries don't have.
Right. You started Toastmasters. What inclined you to do Toastmasters? I was thinking about this this came up like I was pulling up to my house. Like, I want to ask Dave about Toastmasters. What inclined you to do that? What was your motivation to starting Toastmasters? And what is Toastmasters in general?
Toastmasters is an international organization that gives people the opportunity to work on their public speaking and leadership skills. So I'd heard about it a few years back from someone I used to work with at Connecticut College. And then my dad had told me about it. They had a group at his job. And it always intrigued me because I was not a good public speaker at all. Mm-hmm. I hated it. Would get super nervous, would shake, would forget what I had to say.
Yeah.
In high school and in college, I was forced to take a public speaking course. Somehow I got a B in it. And since then, didn't have many opportunities to speak. But it was always something in the back of my mind. I knew one day I wanted to tackle that fear that I had and conquer it. And I joined a Toastmasters group in North Miami. Shout out to Daybreak Toastmasters in North Miami. And I just told myself, there's a line that I think of. It says, the cold water doesn't get any warmer if you wait for later.
Mm.
So no matter how long I wait, this fear isn't going away unless I tackle it myself.
Yeah.
So I decided to join it to improve on this public speaking.
Mm.
And it was really just to get over the fear of it. Before you get up there and speak in front of a crowd, you're nervous, you're overthinking, heart's racing. And what I quickly learned after joining it is that it's really not that serious. It's all in your head.
Yeah.
And I realized real quick that I do have the ability to do this. I do have the courage to do it. And now it's not so much getting over the fear of it, because it no longer exists. Like I've conquered that.
Right.
But it's just a matter of working on the speaking skills itself and working on the speech writing and all of that.
It's nice. What's nice is, you learn that along the way. And I used to do a little bit of ministry, and I've shared that with you. When I was part of Oasis of Restoration in London, when I was probably 18, 19, maybe 20, it was probably the 3 years that I did it. And the same way, right? It kind of, when you get asked to open up a service, or you get asked to prepare a sermon or anything like that, it's anxious. But I think what it comes down to is the preparation. When you're prepared for it, then you're less anxious. And I think that's probably what Toastmasters gave you and kind of taught you, because going back to what you were saying, how you were feeling sweaty and anxious and nervous. But how much did you prepare prior to that? And now you've gone through the Toastmasters multiple times to really feel like, all right, I know what to prepare for. I know how to put a speech together. I know how to deliver it. What are some of your most memorable speeches? Again, I'm not asking for the whole speech, but like, what are some of the most memorable speeches?
I was told I'm a really good storyteller. That's what
you 100%.
I was told that's
100%.
My strong points. People enjoy when I tell certain stories. I gave one about how I randomly saw someone that I knew in the south of France, and how it's one of those things where you think the world's so big, but it's really not. And here's my story. Mm-hmm. Gave another one about it being the end of the year, and how I turned 35. Didn't accomplish a lot of things in my life that I wanted to by age 35, and how it was okay. Mm-hmm. Things happen in life. Sometimes things don't go according to plan. It's not really a rejection in life. It's more of a redirection. Right. And I gave a lot of quotes within that speech to cater towards what I was talking about. That one actually won me a contest down there. The thing I like about Toastmasters is that the people that you get to meet in these clubs, because everyone's there for the same reason. Right. It's to prove and better themselves. Right. So there's a really strong support system. Mm-hmm. People are different ages, races, careers, all that. But we're all there for the same purpose: to get better yourself and to support others. Right. And that support system is really important, and I really, really value that.
That's awesome. I want to shift to books, because I think I've racked up a lot more books since we've gotten pretty close. I think when I moved to Richards Grove, we were always cool and close and hang out. But once I started, having my own place and whatnot, we got close. And I've valued books. You've taught me, 1948. That's one of the first books I bought.
84.
Sorry, 84. That I say 48 because that book was written in 1948. Mm-hmm. So 1984, George Orwell. You just recently, I'll give it to you when you leave. The Think and Grow Rich, Animal Farm. Books that I think are pretty relevant in 2024 and throughout history. What are some of your top books that you would always go back to and read, and probably recommend to people to read?
Yeah, there's one called As a Man Thinketh by
Napoleon Hill.
No, it's not Napoleon Hill. It's someone else. Napoleon Hill has another one.
He did Think and Grow Rich.
He has. Yeah. As a Man Thinketh, and the same person wrote From Poverty to Power. That book talks a lot about the mindset and how important the mindset is to achieve anything. It all starts with that. Mm-hmm. That's a great book. I usually recommend to people. The other one was Resisting Happiness.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Catholic book that was recommended by my dad about how every single day it's a battle to be a better version of yourself
Mm-hmm.
because of all the temptations that are out there in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And every day you have to remind yourself to slay resistance at all times because that's the devil talking, and it keeps you from being the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
There's another one, Up from Slavery, which was the autobiography of, was it Booker T. Washington?
Yeah, I think it was Booker T. Washington. It had to have been, because I think that's the Booker T. Washington book, Up from Slavery.
Yeah, Up from Slavery.
Yeah. I was gonna say it sounds familiar. Yeah, that's
that was an awesome autobiography because it talked about someone who grew up in in a slave household at the time. Right. A civil war happened. He was freed, and his journey to become a successful, entrepreneur, teacher, and it's a real powerful book that I would recommend to anyone to read. Off the top of my head, those are probably the top 3 I'd recommend.
Yeah, when you just mentioned the willpower to kind of break through the minds, having the mindset to kind of push through, the temptations and all that stuff. You uprooted in 2016 from Connecticut to Miami. One, I don't know if I've ever asked you, but one, why Miami? I think I mean, yeah, I can tell. I can answer it in the sense of like, Miami's got the weather, the scenery, everything is great.
It's easy to get used to.
Very easy to get used to. Previous, had you been to Miami previous to that multiple times? I know you have family down there and whatnot.
Yeah, I visited my family a handful of times.
So, was that a place that you always said, if I leave Connecticut, I want to go, or like was there other? I mean, I know from past experiences you were thinking of other places, here in the Northeast, maybe out west. And if from what I remember, you were waiting on whatever job kind of came first, right?
Yeah.
But when you left, you didn't necessarily have a job.
No.
So why Miami? Because there's other places you could have gone and did the same thing.
It just happened to be Miami.
Yeah.
So as you said, I was looking for work, and wherever I got an opportunity to go job-wise, I'd take it. So I was applying to jobs all over the country, a lot in California, Florida, Texas, DC, some in Spain and some in England. And I said, wherever I get an opportunity to go, I'm going to take it and start something new, something fresh, go somewhere where no one knows me. And after a few months, I had no luck. And it was a family member of mine in South Florida who heard about my situation, and her husband offered her house that I could live in until I figured things out. And that's it. Just happened to be South Florida. I mean, they had just moved there a year prior. I mean, 10 years before that, they were living in Virginia outside of DC.
And if that's where they were living, I would have done that
to Virginia. Right. So it's funny because Florida is always a place I saw myself moving to eventually one day. Didn't think it'd be this soon. And when I meet people down there, they give me the typical line of, oh, you got tired of the cold. Oh, you want to be the snowbird. The typical Northeast person coming down, typical guy from New England. And I say, it just happened to be here. I mean, I'm not mad at it. And I just ended up in South Florida.
And Florida's a popular place for people to move to right now.
Especially after COVID. Even before that, it always was the place. I mean, everyone from the Northeast, you always see the Northeast license plates down there.
When we recently traveled down there in February, the beginning of February, you had mentioned that when you come back home, you have to remember that it's a different culture. That you don't have to just be speaking Spanish everywhere.
Yeah.
Was that something you anticipated when you first moved there?
When I come back?
No. So when you first moved to Miami, was that something that you were like aware of, or like how was it a culture shock to you when you were like, man, I'm using Spanish more than I mean, I know you use Spanish with your family.
Yeah.
But, outside of your family, you worked at Connecticut College, you hang out with me, me and Dom and all that stuff.
Yeah.
English was your, you know, let's say you probably 60-40, right? English, Spanish, maybe a little more than that.
Yeah,
70-30. Now, how much are you using the language, and how much of that was, I guess I'm asking, is it a culture shock in the sense that, now I'm using this language all the time, and you speak it fluently,
right.
but not like, for me, I was like, man, I said to you, I said, man, everybody here speaking Spanish, like literally every single person, even the Canadian people that live there. It's like, it's wild. It's wild.
Yeah, it's a very unique place where the majority of the people that are there are Hispanic.
Yeah.
And even the people who aren't Hispanic that are born and raised there, they have some type of, Hispanic swag, you could say.
Yeah.
You could tell that they're from there. So going there, I was surprised how much you hear it.
Yeah.
I mean, you go to any Walmart, you go to any Publix down there, any little coffee shop, and they start talking to you in Spanish first.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times they don't even know English. I mean, you go to some Walmarts, nobody speaks English at all. So
Guatemala,
you go there, Guatemala. Yeah. So you go in these places, and that's all you're used to for so long. And then, when I come back to Connecticut, sometimes I have to remind myself that I don't remind myself. I go into a Stop and Shop or a ShopRite, and I don't hear the reggaeton or the salsa playing over the speakers. Some people aren't approaching me in Spanish first, and it's kind of like a culture readjustment that I have to do.
Yeah, not shock, but readjustment. That's a perfect way to say it.
Yeah, so it's funny.
How much, or how has your perception of what home means to you changed? Is Miami home, or is New London still home?
New London's always going to be home. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, almost 30 years of my life here. I mean, even in college, I went to school in New York City, but I was home a lot.
You're home a lot now, too.
I'm home a lot, yeah.
This is wild, man.
Yeah, I mean, COVID was a blessing in disguise for me personally, just for the fact that I'm able to work remote.
Yeah.
And I realized the benefits of that, of being so far away, but want to come back to Connecticut to see the family, see the friends, and all that. And since I've been away, I've come to appreciate just the area where we're from. Mm-hmm. I mean, the New England coastline, Connecticut coastline. It's very pretty. It's very quaint. It's quiet. It's very relaxing. There's no traffic. It's not densely populated.
Yeah.
And it's something that I've come to appreciate the older I get. Yeah. So New London will always be home. Miami is definitely second home for sure. I consider it more than New York, but New London is always going to be. It's where it's like my ultimate comfort zone.
Yeah,
I've noticed.
We moved away. We lived in Hamden / New Haven for 6 months, and I was homesick from just being here. Like, I'm not used to. And my life of moving out of my house started at 23. I didn't go to college away. I had met Claire in 2013, and we started our lives, and we moved to Hamden, which is cool, right? You got the city life and whatnot. But I learned very quickly that that wasn't for me, and there was a lot of reasons because of that.
What was it for you? Living far away from here, or the more urban living?
Yeah, the urban living's not for me. I thought it's something that I'd like, but it just definitely wasn't. The more metro area, it was very busy for me. And to me, it's just something what I'm accustomed to.
Hence why you live in Salem now.
Hence why I live in Salem. But this is an interview about you. So what I was going to ask you, with that adjustment from, you lived in big cities. You lived in New York for 4 years, right? 4 years?
4 years.
4 years. You lived in New York. You came back here. You live anywhere else or just those two? And then now Miami?
I mean, 4 or 5 months in Europe for a 30-ball program. Gotcha. Other than that, just New York, New London, and then.
Talk to me about what the pros and cons are, and maybe you've readjusted to moving to Miami.
You talking Miami or just big city in general?
No, Miami.
The pros?
Traffic.
Well, that'd be a con.
No, sorry, con. That's a con.
You can do cons first if you want.
Yeah. I don't care.
The con is definitely the traffic. Very densely populated. A city like Miami too, which is a city that everybody goes to party. Mm-hmm. So you have a lot of tourists
right now, right? It's busy.
I mean, now especially spring break, but really year round. I mean, anytime. It's packed in the summer, which is strange because it's so hot. People still go, probably because of vacation. And then wintertime, of course, because of how cold it is everywhere else.
Right.
And in Miami, it's still a good 75 degrees
Yeah.
in January.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of tourists that flock there, makes things very congested. And you don't really, I won't say rare, but it's tough to meet someone that is born and raised in Miami.
Yeah.
Every time you meet someone, they're from somewhere else, like
Right.
myself.
Right.
The pros, and it's very expensive.
It's very
That's
expensive.
definitely a con.
Understand.
Probably
Extremely.
is probably the most expensive place in the country. And
that's why they have the greatest GDP in the country, probably.
It's the most expensive place because you might have a place like San Fran, New York, LA that is more expensive, but at least the wages they're paying you, cost of living
Right.
wise.
So that's good.
Miami's as expensive as these other places, but they're not paying the people anything. So when you consider that, it's very probably the most expensive place. So that could be very challenging. And then when everyone moving down there now, especially since COVID,
prices are continuing to rise.
Yeah. Take into consideration inflation, cost of living, demand, right? Lack of housing, all that. The pros, it's a very international city. So you're meeting people from everywhere, obviously all over Latin America, but people from all over Europe. The food is amazing. And of course, winter has now become my favorite time of the year because it's just the perfect weather.
Yeah, it's like,
and of course, anytime you get a tropical beach with white sand and palm trees,
take that all day.
15 minutes away.
Take that all day.
It's tough to beat.
What were some of the challenges you faced early on when you moved?
Well, I didn't have a job, so I got there and I had a couple of interviews quick with some universities because that was my experience the previous 5 years in higher education administration. Didn't get those jobs, and reality hit real quick that I had no leads, no job, and I just packed my car and drove 1,000+ miles south 95, and I got to figure this out. And so, biggest challenge was just staying positive, because when you're struggling to find a job in a job market like Florida, which I definitely underestimated, a lot of negative thoughts can creep into your mind, a lot of doubt, a lot of maybe regret. Did I make the right decision? Did I make a mistake? But I was not ready to move back yet. I wasn't trying to give up that easily. So I ended up taking a part-time job at a warehouse that my cousin's husband helped me get. And I went from being a manager in Connecticut College, managing a bunch of students, working on different projects, to 6 months later, I'm working at a warehouse in South Florida with no AC, cutting wood, sanding wood, just to pay my car note while I'm looking for other work.
Right.
And that was a very humbling experience. Yeah. And that's when those thoughts started creeping in. Did I make the right decision? Should I go back? That
builds real character, though, man. I think that when knowing you and even going back to your 2 weeks, which we'll touch base a little bit about it, but I'll kind of lead into the next segment. But you did right before you moved. You just like, I'm just going to book 2 weeks and go to Europe, and I'm just going to do it because I'm just going to do it. Why not? And I think for you, you have a level of resilience that you take the negative thoughts and again, just from the outside in, and you don't think about what's happening to you now. You think about what to do next. And I've always observed that about you. And like you said, I couldn't imagine it being moving to Hamden was like, oh, this stinks. Like moving to Miami, I couldn't imagine.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy at all either to keep thinking about the next thing. You're constantly, again, you have that doubt creeping in, and it's funny because people, they hear, oh, David moved to Miami. Oh, he moved down there for that life. He must have a job. He must be out there partying all the time. And it was just a complete, opposite. And all I was trying to do was just focus on getting this job. And it's tough when you're constantly getting denied, or you're getting jobs that want you for $12 an hour.
Right.
Who's going to live off $12 an hour?
Nobody.
It's crazy.
Not even a homeless person.
You can't do anything with that. But that's the type of jobs they were offering. So it's tough. It definitely built some character for sure. And it comes to a point where it's like a fight or flight.
Yeah.
You know, you're in the situation. You can sit there and think about all day. Should I have made the move? Should I have stayed? But that doesn't help the situation right now.
Yeah.
What am I going to do about it now? And persevere and eventually got a job.
There's some principles, and I talk about this, and I've talked about this on my previous shows, specifically when I do my work with insurance. And having, just like, no. So Ray Dalio has a book called Principles, and I talked about this on episode 4 with Kelly Lucas. That the 3 things from his book that I really like is, and that I try to, enforce in my life is radical transparency, discipline, and being very just communicate, like be able to communicate. So like 3 things. And I think one of the things I always wonder is, what are your principles, and just life principles, not even work principles? What are some things for you that you like make sure you're touching on? And you do these things because it's your routine. And you do these things because I know that if I stay on this, I'm going to be able to end up here.
I always practice gratitude all the time. That's very important to me. Grew up in the Catholic Church growing up. I heard a lot from my father growing up. But I always try to keep things in perspective at all times. Life might not be where I would like to be right now. Plans might not have worked out how I saw them in my teen years. Basically, none of my plans worked out as I saw it. But waking up in the morning and just being grateful to open my eyes, take a breath, be grateful for my family, my situation. Because the truth is, 99% of the world would probably give anything to be in my situation.
Right.
And that always keeps me very humble and keep things in perspective and realize it's not that bad.
How do you practice it? Is it something? Is it like through prayer? Is it like you sit down and you sit out and close your eyes and meditate and you do breath work? Is there
Yeah, I'll pray in the morning.
Yeah.
Just a quick thank you, a quick understanding of again, I'm awake, I'm here, my family's here. Thank you, and then just always keeping things in perspective, understanding at any moment in the snap of a finger, things can change real quick, very quick. And I think a lot of people forget that.
I forgot to ask you in the Miami segment, because this was actually just a kind of improv segment. In Miami, is there any like, what is it, like unspoken gems, or like there's hidden places in Connecticut that people have never even come across, when they come across, like, holy moly, like this is beautiful. Anything like that in Miami that you could think of?
Yeah, there's a few spots that I either take people when they visit, or I'll go by myself. You see, there's a spot where you see a city view of the skyline, certain parks, certain places along the intercoastal, the water there. Yeah, certain restaurants in old parts of Little Havana, maybe Coral Gables, Miami Shores, just old places that it's off the beaten path, as they say. Yeah. I mean, I could sit here and think about a bunch of places, but there are definitely places like that. And I always try to seek them out too, because there aren't a lot of people there.
Right. So going back to kind of my next segment here. So it's more of you travel more than pretty much anybody I know, and we go back to 2016 when you're like, I'm out to Europe. Was that your first time? No, you've been to Europe before. But you said, I'm going to go to Europe for 2 weeks, and you did that. But especially here in the States, you're like, I'm going to this place and that place. I'm going to Chicago. I'm going to DC, and make sure I see this, and this. When you think about, let's go to Europe first. When you think about Europe, what European city did you appreciate the most? Like left them like the biggest impression on you?
Biggest
or cities? It could be multiple.
Yeah, I've been to probably a dozen cities in Europe, and they're all unique in their own way. I mean, Rome has all the ruins from the empire. There's ruins from the Roman Empire all over Europe, but Rome obviously being the capital. Paris, of course, is beautiful with the big boulevards and the landmarks. London is a very international city. Athens, of course, with the Parthenon and all that. I think one of the most underrated cities in Europe. I love all of them, by the way. But one of the most underrated cities is probably Madrid
Mm.
It's very overshadowed by a lot of the others. You think of Europe, people say Barcelona, they say, Paris, they say Rome, understandably so. Madrid, however, is just as beautiful as those cities. The architecture is very old. It's a beautiful city, but there's no coast. There's no coastline. It's inland.
Mm.
So a lot of I think that might be why it's not as visited as much as the Barcelonas and Athens and all that. But I love Madrid. I love it. I mean, it's easy to get around. It's a beautiful place.
Have you seen a
Friendly
soccer game there?
people. In Madrid, no, I saw one in Rome.
Yeah. How was that?
Yeah. It was a fun experience. I mean, you go to a game in Europe or South America, and you realize that American sports doesn't have the passion that places around the
That's what I said in Miami when we went to the Caribbean series. Like I was that passion was completely different.
Correct, because all those people were from other countries.
And I said that with Dom. I said, I think who went? So it was Venezuela and Cuba. No, Venezuela and
Puerto Rico.
So, yeah. And Venezuela, I think, won that game.
Puerto Rico won that game. It was actually the only game that Venezuela lost.
Okay, so they won the whole thing.
They won the whole thing. Yeah,
that shows how much I paid attention. But what I remembered was it being late in the game, and whether it was a strikeout and your team's losing, but the team that's losing struck out the opposing batter, the crowd would go crazy.
Yeah,
base it up the middle late in the game, down by 3 or 4 runs. The crowd was losing their mind. That's a level of passion we don't see in the United States.
No, we don't. And of course, in other countries, the main sport is soccer.
Right.
It's not that popular here. Yeah. It's gaining some traction, but it will never be as popular as football or baseball or basketball. But the thing with soccer is, there's a lot of appreciation for the things that happen outside of actually scoring a goal. I mean, in this country, it's all about getting the points, getting the touchdown, getting the home runs, putting points on the scoreboard. Over there, they appreciate more the almost goal. Yeah. They appreciate the attempt. They appreciate the effort, and they'll clap for you. And they're really passionate about.
That's amazing.
The whole game.
The parallel between the two, in that Caribbean baseball versus American baseball, in your explanation of soccer. Because I've never been to a international soccer game. I actually probably have only been to one soccer game at MetLife, and I don't even know what it was. It might have been some sort of MLS team back in like early 2000s.
Well, Copa America is coming up in the U.S. this summer, so
we'll have to
do something
for sure
to get you out there.
Any unexpected discoveries during your travels that you were surprised when you overseas, that you were like, oh, I wasn't expecting this, and whether it was a historical finding or anything like that, or maybe just you had heard about it or read about it, and it was just that much better in person.
One thing you always hear about is how rude Europeans can be, how rude the French are, and how much they hate Americans and all that kind of stuff. And some of that is true, and for valid reasons. As Americans think that if it's not America, it doesn't matter, and we're very ignorant to a lot of things and all that. But the people that I met out there, they're very interested in just you as a person. They don't see you as just the ugly American. They see you as just somebody that happens to be from America.
Right. And
that's how I viewed them. I would love, I met people out there that were from Sierra Leone, Africa. They were from, an Ecuadorian living in London. They were from India, living in Liverpool, and just hearing their story. Everybody has a story. And in a place like Europe, a lot of immigrants go to all these cities, and it just fascinated me how interested they were in me as an American, because they saw me separate from the atrocities that my government might do in invading another country or whatnot. And I saw them being from a Middle Eastern country, and I saw them as just a person, not what some terrorist group from their country might do. And kind of that whole kumbaya thing where it's, we're all just people trying to have a good, peaceful life. And people are, especially travelers, I mean, they're so willing to just talk and be open and just share a beer with you and just chop it up. And
kindness and compassion is a language that everybody has that doesn't get talked about most.
It's a universal language for sure. Yeah, definitely. And it's funny how similar experiences can be too when you get to talk to people.
And I shared this with Joe David Cruz the other day on our episode, and how people are very easy to jump down each other's throats, whether left, right, red, blue, whatever the case might be. But when it comes to a shared common purpose, all that gets thrown aside. That people don't, and what I mean by that is he was sharing a time, he runs a softball tournament, and he a lot. The people that were at the softball tournament are people who could who would argue about certain things, but because they share the same thing and they've experienced the same thing, again, they share the same, that compassion, the kindness comes out.
Yeah.
We need more of that. We know we need more of that. Forget the left, right, forget this, that. Anyway, we can talk about that on another episode. But what about America? Well, you went to Arizona 2 summers ago?
It's 3 summers.
3 summers ago, you went to Arizona.
4 years
summers
ago.
It's been that long? Wow. Oh yeah, during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
You've done that. You've obviously been to DC, a lot of places in the Northeast. You always try to find something to do. One of the most memorable things for me is telling you that we went to DC and did nothing besides sit at a bar for 12 hours and then went home and we're like, we didn't even go see
the Lincoln
Memorial. But for you picked these things out, and even when we went to Atlanta, you had a whole agenda for us to do. Go see the Martin Luther King Church, go see his house, do the Civil Rights Museum. Where in America where's some of the I guess for you, what do you appreciate most in America in some of your sightseeing and travels?
I used to really like going to cities.
Mm-hmm.
I like urban planning and urban studies and just learning about cities in general. So usually I'm in the city, I'll look up some things that's unique to that city, certain history museum, learning about how the city, was divided under racial lines back then. It's just something unique. And, Chicago, learned, their history with being burned down in the fire in the 1800s, and their downtown was elevated a whole store. But I don't even know this. Downtown Chicago was raised on stilts. That's how the city is. And that's how they rebuilt it after the fire. And so like Atlanta or New York is a crazy city, so big that every time I go there, I try to do something new that I've never done. Mm-hmm. And I've been there dozens and dozens and dozens of times. I used to live there, and I can still find something new. So that was my go-to when I would travel alone or with people, was try to visit a new city. When COVID hit, cities were locked down. So I had a good friend of mine, Miguel, that and he took me hiking up in New Hampshire during COVID. And it sparked a love and interest of hiking for me. And since then, I tried to visit now national parks all over the country. It got me into that. So my first solo trip for that was Arizona. I went to Sedona, and then I went to the Grand Canyon and hiked that. That was amazing to see that in person. I went with him again to Death Valley, California. Went to the lowest point in North America, which is 242 feet below sea level.
And that's where you said that you thought it was sand, but it was actually salt, right?
I thought it was snow. It was all white.
You thought it was snow, and it was salt.
It was all salt.
Wow.
And you're driving down, and you can see the salt underneath you, and you realize while you're driving down, you're already at sea level, and you're looking down on it.
Wow.
And that's how low it is, because the
water
keeps evaporating.
That's incredible.
It just leaves the salt behind. It's awesome. It's real cool.
Yeah.
Hiking a national forest in California, and then 2 years ago I went to Utah, hike Arches National.
I forgot about you. I forgot you went to Utah.
Yeah, I did a kind of a split urban nature trip where I did 2 days in Arches National Park in Moab, and then a couple of days in Salt Lake City.
Yeah. Not to be fast forward life, we want to slow it down as much as possible. But I learned, because my in-laws, they're at that age, 65. When you hit 65, you can go to all national parks for free.
I didn't know that. Maybe I should wait till I'm 65.
You can go every single one of them for free.
You could also go to any national park for free if you go before 5 a.m.
Most people aren't awake that early.
I was, because I was in a really tight time schedule. For Arches, I didn't know, because of COVID, I didn't know that you needed a reservation to enter the park.
Yeah.
And I already booked my hotel and gone and all that.
Wow.
And looking into it, I'm like, I need a reservation?
Yeah.
And looking into it, I went to eat at a restaurant, and somebody was like, "Oh, you're going?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know what I'm going to do."
Yeah.
I think it's 6 a.m. He's like, "If you go before 6 a.m., you can get it for free."
Wow.
Oh, thank you. I put my alarm 4:15.
That's
Got
you
up,
would.
and I was in there.
Leave it to you.
See the stars, see the sun come up,
Yeah.
start the hike.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
Leave
yeah.
it to you. How
So
much?
I don't gotta wait till I'm 65. I
You
just gotta wake up early.
Just wake
That's
up
all.
early. There you go. Bang it all out. Uh, when you think about your travels, America, Europe, do you think any of it, or I should, I guess how I should phrase the question is, how much of it has shaped your outlook on life? Is there certain parts of the world that it makes you appreciate more where you are, or is there, obviously they say America's the greatest country in the world, but there's other things that are positive in other countries as well. Is there anything that shaped your outlook, um, based off of the countries and the areas and even in our country that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, they always say it's the greatest country on earth, mostly because of the quality of life and the freedoms that we're supposed to have here based off our
Capitalism,
rights,
all that
right?
stuff.
But I mean, every country had its beauty, had its uniqueness. I was fortunate enough where I was going to Peru at a very young age. My first time there, I think I was 6 years old, and that was the first time as a kid ever seeing poverty, third world poverty, uh, seeing little kids either begging for money at stoplights, selling chiclets while their mom was in the middle taking care of an infant.
Wow.
Seeing that. So that humbles you real quick as a kid. It's kind of, again, back to what I said about putting things in perspective. I've always kind of had that. So traveling Europe, traveling South America. I mean, I haven't been to Africa or Asia yet. That's on my to-do list. But it's just the beauty of seeing how little of the world that we actually know about.
Yeah.
I mean, you said I travel a lot. I don't think I travel that much because I know people that backpacked all the continents besides Antarctica. So when I compare myself to them, I'm like, I'm slacking. I'm really haven't done that much. These are people who are, what do they call them? Nomads. They're out there just traveling and living off, doing little side jobs just to afford it. I haven't done that yet, but I do get that I've traveled more than a lot of people.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate enough that I've seen a lot. So it's all very humbling. I mean, I personally, what gets me going is I love visiting new places, whether it's domestic or international.
Yeah. So closing segment here is your top destinations of where you'd like to travel to. So you just mentioned Africa and Asia. Are those on your top 3 destinations that you would like to travel to?
No.
What are your top 3?
I would like to go to Switzerland. Something about seeing those little towns up in the mountains. I know a few people that have been recently, and they tell me it's all very picturesque. It's like you're driving through a painting. Would love to do that, especially now that I'm into a lot more, going to national parks. And domestically, I've never really got to experience that much in Europe. When I was in Europe, it was all about going to the cities and all that. So if I had to pick a top 3 destinations, I mean, Norway to see the fjords, Switzerland to drive through the mountains. I'd say probably Brazil.
Brazil,
South America. Yeah.
Is there any experience that you wish to have in any of these, in those 3 that you had? So it's like
just the same thing that I've been doing every time I travel really anywhere, just getting to know the local culture, the people, eat the food, and experience whatever comes my way, because you're in a new place in an unfamiliar territory. You have to expect the unexpected. So for the best, and of course, like anywhere else, watch your back.
Good stuff. Dave, bro, this was fun.
This was fun.
This is insightful. I appreciate you letting me do this with you. Episode 8 going to go live in a few weeks.
Hopefully it's first of many.
Yeah, first of many. We'll do more.
When I'm up,
do it quarterly. You're here once a quarter. So
when I'm up in New England, as often as I am,
we could definitely talk about something else. So appreciate it, bro.
All right.